I think that we are likely to see some real changes from the Biden period. I do think the Ukraine war is likely to end, and that's a hugely beneficial thing. I think there's actually more likely to be peace in the Middle East and between the US and China than was true of the Biden administration. Trump believes in going it alone, but he's not especially warlike. He doesn't like international rules. He doesn't like the UN. He has pulled out the first day, the US, from the Paris Climate Agreement and from the World Health Organization. This is part of the Trump idea that any global rules are a constraint on American freedom and sovereignty. I don't agree with this. I think countries agree together to do things for a reason because it's mutually beneficial. But in the Trump ideology, agreements with other countries is just a constraint on your own action. So he believes in unilateralism.
It seems like the global geopolitical landscape is shifting. Our country is starting to lose the shine and influence it once had. Sachs believes the war in Ukraine is approaching its end. But unfortunately, that doesn't bring good news for us because new conflicts may soon follow.
But he doesn't especially believe in war. In fact, I think on balance, he will avoid war even more than Biden did. Biden represented the mainstream military-industrial complex of the United States. In the mainstream U.S. approach, war is part of American power. For Trump, I think tariffs, threats, embargoes, isolation, other things are more the arsenal that he likes. Trump is going to be nasty in the Western Hemisphere, probably more than he's going to be in the Eastern Hemisphere. So I'd be more worried today in Canada or Mexico than in China. Let's put it that way. With Canada and Mexico, Trump doesn't exactly know or care where the borders are necessarily. He thinks Canada is part of the United States. He thinks Mexico is a pain in the neck for the United States, and he'll do what he wants to do. And so I wouldn't feel very comfortable being the United States' next door neighbor right now. But when it comes to China, he didn't mention China in the inaugural address. He said he wants peace, and I rather believe that, actually, at least peace among the major powers. I think the other thing to say about Trump is he believes that the United States is exceptional, and he believes that the big powers are different from all the rest of the world. He rather likes big, powerful countries and powerful leaders. And so I think actually whatever he does on trade and tariffs and other things, which will not be friendly necessarily to China, he will want a good relationship with President Xi Jinping. He'll want a good relationship with Vladimir Putin. This is not the same with Biden. Maybe also Biden's health or status, we don't know, prevented diplomacy, but Biden was completely uninterested in normal diplomacy among leaders. Trump is much more interested. So it's a mixed bag. Again, if I were Panama, Canada, Mexico, I'd be pretty nervous today. But being in China and in Hong Kong, I think it's a pretty benign start. Nothing surprising, if anything, less antagonistic than one might have expected. Trump says he wants to visit China. That's a good thing. Absolutely. I hope that happens. Trump says he wants peace. I really hope that happens because that's the single most important issue for the whole world. And he didn't even mention in his inaugural all the other threats to the world trading system. So let's see. But first day, we've all survived it. America is now much less bound by international rules, but not going to war, at least between the major powers. I don't think that it makes much difference whether it's 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after the basic point is we have three military superpowers armed to the teeth. And you could add India also as a major nuclear power that is also not so powerful in the conventional arms, but significant globally. None of these three powers can defeat the other, even conceptually, other than through world self-annihilation. In other words, the only threat that China faces from the United States is tantamount to a full nuclear war. The only threat that the United States faces from China is tantamount to a full nuclear war. The United States could not defeat Russia. Russia could not defeat the United States. Given all of this, the fact of the matter is we're actually secure, the major powers, if we don't blow up the world. The only risk to the major powers is world destruction. So if we stay out of each other's lane a bit, keep space between each other, don't provoke each other, the world actually is stable. The problem of the last 30 years was that the United States didn't know that there were two other superpowers whose lanes they kept crossing. So the United States thought Russia was a pushover, nothing to worry about. If we want to expand NATO to Ukraine, nothing Russia can do. If we want to expand NATO to the Caucasus region, nothing to do. If we want to expand NATO to Central Asia, nothing Russia can do. Well, the Ukraine war resulted from that kind of thinking, and it proved that the United States cannot beat Russia in its own neighborhood with conventional arms, and that any attempt to escalate, Russia would escalate, and we'd be on the way to world destruction. So the United States, I think, learned a lesson from this. Well, let me put it this way. The United States should learn a lesson from this, which is that its own behavior was obnoxious, provocative, and dangerous. The question is, did the United States learn the same lesson vis-a-vis China? Because there obviously are two provocations by the US in China. One is Taiwan, and the other is the South China Sea. And if the United States is halfway sensible, it will say, we're not going to disturb you in your own neighborhood. This is your own business. And if the US does that, there will be peace, there will be normal relations, there will be mutual security. If the United States says, well, we can do what we want, or it's worth provoking China, there will be disaster.
Sachs explains that the world is entering a completely new phase. The war in Ukraine, he says, is ending not because the sides have reached an agreement, but because both are exhausted. And while Europe hopes for stability, Sachs warns that the real challenges are only beginning. He argues that the relationship between the United States and China will become the key factor shaping everything, from economics to security and global politics. And since the US refuses to accept the new global reality, the world is moving into a period of tension that will be felt everywhere, including here. Countries that once stayed silent are now raising their voices, and America can no longer control the world the way it used to. That's why Sachs warns that we're entering a time of uncertainty where even a small mistake could trigger a new conflict.
Trump is probably a little bit less likely to provoke China than Biden was. Biden's administration was really incompetent, and they were rude to China, did not engage in diplomacy with China. A couple of meetings were held so that not everything fell apart, but basically it was a terrible administration. The United States is in a very confused mood. And when I say the United States, all I mean is the elite in the security system, because the U.S. mentality, and Trump expressed it in his inaugural address, is the U.S. is the exceptional country. And if you take that belief seriously, you end up creating a lot of trouble because other countries just want you out of their front yard or backyard. And so whether Trump gets that and uses restraint, that's the major test of his presidency, actually. A smart president is one who exercises restraint in the mutual interest of the major powers. A stupid president is one who provokes the other major powers. And so this is Trump's single biggest challenge because the world's fate depends on this kind of challenge. Trump said that he understands Putin's point of view, that, in other words, if he were Putin, and I'm putting a little bit of words in Trump's mouth, but if he were Putin, he'd understand why NATO enlargement wouldn't look good. If he does the same thing, putting himself in China's perspective, and sees the United States arming Taiwan over China's big objections or militarizing further the South China Sea, and building up missile systems, building up AUKUS, building up military relations, urging Japan to remilitarize and so forth, he would understand that the U.S. is provoking a lot of the reaction that it is pointing to, and rather both sides should calm down. Look, the United States, Trump can't even accept Greenland as being an independent country. He thinks Canada is a state. What he's really saying is the Americas are our backyard.
He wants the sea passageway, right? Is that the reason why?
Look, there are many reasons, but it's a kind of crude American imperialism, I would say, that goes back to his favorite president of 1896, William McKinley. So it basically says, this is our neighborhood. Don't encroach on it. Now, the point I'm making is not that it's right to threaten Mexico or Canada, but if Trump uses the same logic just a little bit and understands China's point of view about America's actions, he would then adopt a more restrained point of view. And if he does and says, we don't want to have war with China over the South China Sea or war with China over Taiwan, this would improve global security incredibly. So all of this is to say, yes, China's making huge advances in many arms systems, in missile systems, in nuclear, in hypersonic systems, and so on. Not surprising. But we don't want an arms race. We want mutual restraint. And this is really the question of whether the two sides can be smart enough to say, if we back off a little bit, don't encroach on each other's core interests, then the tensions will come down and we could actually make more money, have a better life, have more security, and so on.
Sachs argues that the world no longer operates under the rules that defined the last 30 years. The power that once had the final say no longer does. And that's exactly where the problem begins. He explains that the war in Ukraine isn't just a clash between two countries. It's the result of a much deeper confrontation between major global powers. One side is desperately trying to hold on to dominance, while the other is slowly rising to take its place. Sachs emphasizes that the United States no longer behaves like a calm, confident leader, but rather like a country afraid of losing its position. And that fear leads to impulsive decisions. Instead of diplomacy, it chooses pressure. Instead of cooperation, it chooses confrontation.
Even stronger in the future. And the basic reason is that China is technologically dynamic, and it is already at the forefront of a large number of technologies that are the key technologies for the next 30 years. Electric vehicles, zero carbon energy systems, fourth generation nuclear, of course, battery supply chains, hydrogen economy, advanced shipping, 5.5G. These are the technologies that the world needs to make the energy transformation, to make the digital transformation. And China is very strong and very dynamic also in those technologies. And the manufacturing ecosystem, especially where we are in the Greater Bay Area, is absolutely extraordinary. I would say unique in the world. So, what's said in the media day to day, well, that's day to day news, but China, like any large economy, has ups and downs and quarters that are bad or quarters that are good, and the COVID was a disruption and so forth. But you have to look at the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are very, very strong. And that's very good, because not only is it good for China, it's good for the world. I do want to come back to this question about China's statecraft, and just to say, of course, we can theorize, but I would point to two historical facts that I think are positive and important. First, China hasn't been in any war for more than 40 years. This is extraordinary. The U.S. has been at war basically every day for the last 40 years, and usually in a number of places. China had a 1-month war with Vietnam in 1979, and since then. And that kind of long peace is, I think, the best evidence we have about China's statecraft right now. There's another historical piece of evidence that I personally believe in, though it's argued and debated among historians and scholars, and that is there was a long, long period of several hundred years, basically 500 years, of what has been called the Confucian peace in the region of China, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, lasting really from the beginning of the Ming Dynasty until the British invasion of China in 1839 and the First Opium War. And so this long period almost had no war at all. Now, China was undoubtedly then, whether it's PPP or market prices, though the concept didn't exist of GDP, it was by far the dominant power. But China didn't invade Japan. China never in its history invaded Japan, except when the Mongols were briefly running things from in 1274 and 1281. Other than that, for 700 years, it was never an invasion from China to Japan. China never invaded Korea in its history, as far as I know. China invaded Vietnam, yes, 6 centuries ago, in 1410 or so. So this is a long, long peace. And I think that is part of China's statecraft. It is part of a Confucian order, if one could call it that. I believe that that's true. Some of my colleagues in the U.S. say, oh, no, that's not true. China has to be like every other country, which in their mind is war all the time, because in America, it's war all the time. And why? Well, Europe has been basically at war for 1,000 years. And the fundamental difference is China unified and mainly stayed unified for 2,000 years, whereas Europe was fragmented. Then it colonized other parts of the world, and they fought. Even Donald Trump in his inaugural address, he expressed the kind of 1950s happy vision of America, that we fought our way across the continent. It was a very bloody bunch of conquests by colonial power. We're not supposed to say that in Trump's America, but the truth is it was an expansionist imperial period. And that's a different history from China's history. So bottom line for me is there really could be a big difference of statecraft. China, cautious, friends or potential friends, and this makes a lot of sense. We had one sensible president during my lifetime, which was President Kennedy, who tried peace, and he had a very wonderful line. He said, across the gulfs and barriers that now divide us, we must remember there are no permanent enemies. Hostility today is a fact, but it is not a ruling law. And so he talked about the fact that don't think about enemies and friends. But when you get to Biden, it's all, you're our friend, you're our enemy. And that's the mentality that's so dangerous.
In the end, Sachs's message is simple but brutally honest. The world has changed, and America is no longer at the center of it. Wars may end, but rivalries remain. And if the major powers fail to accept the new balance of power, the next conflicts won't be far behind. Which leaves us with one question. Are we heading toward a safer world, or stepping into the biggest crisis of our time?